are excited you are here with us. Well, what a Saturday it is. We finally have college football. We didn't think it would happen. We really didn't know how it would happen, but they're going to play. Of course, a lot of games won't have fans. We have had some games, and we'll get into it in a minute, that have been postponed, mostly for next week. Most of this week's, or this Saturday's games that were postponed were earlier in the weeks. We made the graphics about a week ago, so we'll roll through them and we'll talk all about that. But it's fun to finally be back in a very different setting. We've never really done this before because we didn't really know, if we're going to a game and it's at 11, and then you try and do this from 8 to 9, and you really need to be at the stadium an hour before, and it really, it's never worked out. But we finally get to do it in this bizarre season. So we're excited. We have a lot planned for today. It's going to be a lot of fun for sure. But when we look at it, one of our main emphases for today is the ACC. They're really getting back, and they're playing conference games today. Clemson plays Wake Forest. North Carolina plays Syracuse. The Big 12 is back today, but they are playing their non-conference games. They had 2 weeks to play their non-conference games before they actually start their conference-only schedule, their 9 games, because there's only 10 of those teams and you can't play yourself, when the SEC starts the same time. But, they still decided they wanted to go to that one non-conference because they want to have 10 games like everybody else. ACC actually does have actually has 11. So, we're going to go ahead and get into our Saturday slate. In our first game, we're going to go in the time order that these games will be taking place. And our first game is North Carolina-Syracuse. North Carolina has all kinds of expectations. I know everyone feels really good, but, let's be real. They did go 7-6 last year and beat Temple in their bowl game. That's Temple. So all those highlights you see that they're going to show of Sam Howell, that was Temple, not Alabama. But, I think Syracuse has a good shot. I don't know if they can really compete with Clemson or Notre Dame. Of course, everyone wants to point to what they did last year. They went for 2 to try and beat the Tigers at home. They didn't. North Carolina actually doesn't play Clemson this year. So that's kind of a break for both teams. I don't think they really wanted to play each other. I'm sure North Carolina would want to finally now beat them after getting so close, a point away just last season. And then Syracuse, they went 5-7 last year. Dino Barber's their head coach. They kind of slowly been getting better. Everyone wants to point to, at least in his coaching career, when they upset Syracuse on Friday the 13th, about 2 seasons ago. Kelly Bryant was still their quarterback. And, they actually finished like 4-6, or they had a really bad year. 4-8 or something. They had a bad year, so, although everybody's like, oh, they beat Clemson that one, no, they're not that great. So, we'll see. We'll make our picks later in the show, as you saw on our pregame lineup. But next, we have Iowa State, Louisiana Lafayette. So, our first Big 12 game will be at 11 o'clock following College Game Day, Central Time. All of our times are in Central Time. Iowa State said they were one of the first ones, I feel like, to say they weren't going to have any fans. At least for the beginning. They might have said all season long. So I think they were like months in advance they said that. And everyone was like surprised. And now that's slowly kind of trickled down. But Louisiana Lafayette, they're an okay team. But I think Iowa State, they look to have a pretty big year. They're always like that underdog team that everyone likes. They always get some love in the polls. Because oh, look at Iowa State. So we'll see what happens with them. And then our next game that actually isn't happening today is Baylor and Louisiana Tech, or La Tech. So I believe it was Baylor in this one who had the outbreak. I believe they're just postponing this. I think they are going to try and make this up. This was later in the week. I want to say this came out last weekend. They might be able to play next weekend. We don't know, at least I don't know, the status of that game. But I do know it's not happening today in McLean Stadium. Baylor has Dave Miranda as their new head coach, as defensive coordinator from LSU last season, because Matt Rule went to the NFL to the Panthers. So it's going to be a really weird year for Baylor because you don't really know what you're getting. And for all new head coaches, this has to be really tough because you didn't have your spring practice. You had very weird scheduled fall practice, so you really don't know what you're getting. They do have an experienced quarterback in Charlie Brewer, though, but he's running a whole new system. So we'll just have to see how that goes for all the first-year head coaches. They'll have to just, I guess, give them a little bit more grace than normal. And then the Fighting Irish, they're definitely probably a playoff. Well, they are a playoff contender. Our first one to play of the season, and they're playing Duke. So this is Notre Dame's first and only, as of right now, season in the ACC. Last night they posted some pictures, had the ACC on the helmet and on the jersey and on the field. So kind of weird, but they're part of the ACC this year, and they'll be taking on their first ACC game of the year is today against the Duke Blue Devils. David Cutcliffe is their head coach. They didn't make it to a bowl game last year. Many people don't pick Duke to be that great this year. I mean, they're never going to be great. I mean, they did go to that conference championship in 2013, but I don't really think they're going to be good at all. It'll be on NBC. Notre Dame will, even though they're going to the ACC, they still have their NBC TV contract, so any of their home games will still be on NBC. You know, they were kind of their every other Notre Dame sport is in the ACC, and so in football, when they joined the ACC for everything else, and they said we're still going to be independent for football, they have to play a couple ACC games a year, and so that it's kind of how that works. The home games are NBC, the away games are whatever the ACC wants. So they'll be on NBC. I know they'll be on NBC when they play like Clemson at home later this year. We'll get to that in our ACC preview for those games of the year. And then you have Kansas State and Arkansas State at 2:30. We're now in the next time slot. You know, NBC kind of starts whenever they want. They're in their next time slot on Fox Sports 1, Bill Snyder Stadium. Kansas State, a little bit of a surprise team. Remember, they beat Oklahoma last year. In their first year, you know, they had that weird non-year with Bill Snyder, but other than that, really their first time, Bill Snyder's not coming back again, and they got some buy-in. They had a pretty decent year, so we'll see what they can do in year two. This is their non-conference game. I don't really think there'll be much of a hiccup there. And then one game I'm really excited about is Florida State, Georgia Tech. This is probably our first, quote, big game, unless you have the ACC network. I don't know how your cable works. We don't. So this is really our first big game of the day. Florida State, Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech with Coach Jeff Collins. Last year they stunk, and there's really no nice way to put that. I think they lost to the Citadel. So tough time for Old Tech. But I really think that they're going to really try and make strides in year two. He's really been trying to up the facilities. They got some new turf. They got the new fancy lights. I think they've been working on some of their facilities. So we'll see. It's just that when they ran the triple option, they didn't have a lot of talent, and so it's pretty much it is a completely different playbook, but it's a completely different skill set. And if you were a wide receiver, why would you have ever gone to Georgia Tech before now? So we'll just see if they can kind of make some improvement in year two. And then for the Seminoles, Jimbo Fisher kind of left. Weirdly, he ran out for Texas A&M, and that's been okay. And then they hired Willie Taggart. He was at USF for a while. He went to Oregon for 1 year because that makes sense. And I think we should have known when Oregon wasn't that sad when he left. That was probably a telltale sign. Florida State stunk. They were not disciplined. I think they were one of the most penalized teams in the entire country. So they now have their new head coach, Mike Norvell. Yeah, that's right. From Memphis. He took Memphis to the Cotton Bowl last year. Memphis really likes these last couple of years. They have a new head coach. They get to a New Year's Six bowl game or a big bowl game. Well, the Birmingham Bowl is not that big. And then for their conference it is. And they just kind of give them away. I know Justin Fuente, will get to him in a second. Is at Virginia Tech. So I think it'll be a good one. It is at Doak Campbell Stadium. There is going to be limited capacity there, so there will be a couple fans doing the tomahawk or their chant, not the tomahawk cough. That's the Braves. So now we have Oklahoma, Missouri State. You're probably not watching this one, not because you don't want to, because you don't want to pay for it. It's on pay-per-view. This is kind of different. I can't remember the last time a college football game was on pay-per-view, but that's the case. I guess with all these weird TV contracts, I don't really know who would pay. I think I looked it up. It's like $85 to watch Oklahoma versus Missouri State from your couch. It would have been less expensive if they had just let you go to the stadium. But so we'll see. This is the first year that Oklahoma in the Lincoln Riley era that he has a quarterback that Oklahoma recruited from high school. Baker was at Texas Tech before. You had Jalen Hurts was at Alabama. So all of Kyler Murray was at Texas A&M. So this is their first time that they have their quarterback that is from high school come through their program, watch Jalen Hurts play, and so we'll kind of see how this Lincoln Riley offense works out. I'm sure it'll be great. When is it not? So I think it's going to be another big year for Oklahoma. Probably my favorite to win the Big 12. And then the big one tonight, our Saturday night prime time. It was our Patrick Party Game of the Week. For those of you that read our newsletter, we encourage you to subscribe on patrickparty.com. Clemson and Wake Forest. It's a big one. I mean, they've won the national championship multiple times in the playoff era. Trevor Lawrence is back year 3. So, I mean, they won that big one out in Phoenix, Arizona in the Fiesta Bowl, after Justin Fields, had the interception. He had that huge run against Ohio State as well. They didn't win the national championship game. He was like, it took me weeks to recover. He hadn't lost in college yet until that LSU game. He has never lost an ACC game. So, Wake Forest, I don't know. I think this would have been a pretty good game if Jamie Newman was still their quarterback. He went to Georgia, and then he sat out, so he's a non-factor for this whole season. So we'll see what happens for Wake Forest. They've been okay the last couple of years. I know they've won a Belk Bowl or something. We'll see. This might be a good game for a quarter, but it's something. And then our other game that is not happening today, and I guess will be rescheduled due to COVID-19, is Oklahoma State plays Tulsa. Well, they were. Tulsa is the one on this case who had the outbreak. So Oklahoma State, with their big running back, a Heisman favorite, won't get to start off. It was going to be on ESPN, but that is no more. So that's for that. But on ESPN2 tonight, kind of a local game for those of you in Alabama. We have South Alabama, which Tulane's not that close. But we have South Alabama, Tulane, in South Alabama's brand new stadium on ESPN2 at 6:30. Some good exposure for these schools. I mean, I don't really know who's going to be watching it, but it's just a fun one. It's fun to have a little bit of college football, and I think that'll be a good one. Tulane played at Auburn last year. They made it to a bowl game. South Alabama's slowly been getting better. They really beat Southern Miss bad, and Southern Miss fired their coach. Some early coaching candidates for that, Hugh Freeze, went to Southern Miss. So we'll see how that turns out. They have the whole season to pick from someone. A lot of people thought the coaching carousel wouldn't be as big this year. Money's a lot tighter. You can't pay those big buyouts. I mean, I can't think there's a huge buyout at Southern Miss, but who knows? It's crazy. And then our second to last one on the Saturday slate is Texas UTEP. UTEP is probably the worst team still playing in the FBS. They've stunk. This will be on the Longhorn Network, so most people won't watch it. And I expect Sam Ehlinger to run wild in this one. I don't think it's going to be very close, but it's something on, and it's a game to talk about with the big boy. And then our last game of the Saturday slate, Kansas is playing Coastal Carolina. Now, I know a bunch of you are like, well, why wouldn't you ever talk about Kansas? Nobody cares. Well, Les Miles is at Kansas, so it's always a little bit interesting. Last year, they had an okay year. I believe they went 5-7. We'll see how they can do. Try and make a step. Maybe make a bowl game, if that's a thing still. Nobody really knows. So it'll be on Fox Sports 1 at 9 o'clock. This is our late night game, so we'll get to see the Mad Hatter out there. Well, we're going to go ahead and get into our top 25 breakdown. One weird thing, we're going to talk about it before we show you the polls, is when they released this a couple weeks ago, everybody already knew, when they voted, everybody already knew the Big Ten wasn't playing and the Pac-12 wasn't playing. So we just figured, well, they won't be in the polls because they're not playing. I mean, how can you rank a team that has not played yet against other teams that have? That just doesn't make sense, and they're not playing. So, how do you keep ranking Ohio State number 2 or something when Alabama and Auburn and Notre Dame, they're all winning? So, it's kind of weird. I don't really know exactly how they're going to do that. What they said, though, we'll go ahead and throw up the poll for you. What they said was that the preseason poll was just so we could get an idea of what we were supposed to have this year. I don't really know what that means, but I guess this is what it would have looked like. So, you have Clemson, the team. I mean, everyone's saying it's probably going to be Clemson and Ohio State, a rematch of that Fiesta Bowl last year. Those are probably the two top dogs. Ohio State's out of it. Then you had Alabama and Georgia, the two top from the SEC. Most people have been saying that. Then you have Oklahoma. They normally start around 5. The defending champs, LSU at 6. Penn State at 7. Florida is at 8. A lot of people, that's kind of the hot pick. If you don't really want to pick Georgia, Florida is probably your bet for the SEC. A lot of people think that they can really take a step. Dan Mullen's squad. Oregon at 9. Notre Dame at 10. Now in the ACC. You know what, that ACC schedule, could it be easier for them to get in the playoff? Could they afford to lose one game? I don't think so. The ACC still isn't that strong. Auburn's in the 11. Wisconsin 12. A&M 13 and 14 are the two Texas rivals. Well, they don't play anymore, but I would say they're still rivals. Still don't like each other. We'll just note some other ones. You had North Carolina at 18. UCF and Cincinnati probably fighting it out for that group of 5 spot. Tennessee cracked the top 25 at number 25. Now, one thing I kind of saw that I thought was cool on ESPN, I thought we could include it in here, is this is the poll that you're looking at right now. This is the official poll. This is what it'll say on all the ESPN graphics. But, the AP, when they release it, they also release all these teams that are receiving votes. And so based on all the receiving votes, here's your revamped top 25. The orange numbers are teams that weren't originally in the poll, but based on when you went back and you took out all of the teams that weren't playing, slid everybody else in the rankings up, and then when you looked at the votes, this is what the top 25 would be. So, you have Memphis, Virginia Tech making it in. A lot of ACC schools right on the cusp of the top 25. You have Virginia Tech, Miami, and Louisville from 18 to 20. Appalachian State in there. You had Kentucky also making it for the SEC. Baylor and TCU. Baylor won't be playing this week. And then Virginia to round it out. Virginia had an okay year. I believe they made the ACC championship last year, but they were no match for Clemson. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get into our main thing, our ACC preview. The ACC kind of starts conference play this year. It's their big one. So we're going to go ahead and kind of talk about them. We'll probably do a big Big 12 preview next week, and then we'll have a huge SEC preview when the Southeastern Conference starts play on September 26th in right about 2 weeks, with about an hour or so change. So with that, we're going to go ahead and predict and show you our ACC projected standings. This is what I think. When you look at it, I still think Clemson's the top dog. I don't think anyone's dethroning them or anything like that. I think the Notre Dame game could be interesting. It is in South Bend. We'll see. So I like Notre Dame at the 2 spot. North Carolina, I think they're going to be pretty good this year with Sam Howell, Mac Brown. They've really been upping their facilities. They've actually had a pretty strong recruiting run. So I like North Carolina in the 3. I think Florida State is going to be in the 4. A lot of people say they're probably a couple years away. A lot of people really like Mike Norvell. I like Florida State. I think they have a lot of talent. I think it's more or less making the talent kind of all come together, the whole team come together. Louisville in the 5. Louisville actually was pretty okay last year. I think the farther away they get from the Bobby Petrino era, probably the better. Virginia Tech in the 6 with Justin Fuente. Miami in the 7. Derek King, they beat UAB this past Thursday night. They beat them by about 20. So a big one for the Hurricanes. Rhett Lashley, former Auburn offensive coordinator, is now their offensive coordinator. He went to UConn, and then he went to SMU, and SMU had a big year last year. Now, I think they played for their conference championship, so now he's at Miami. They had a terrible offense last year. And then Virginia in the 8. Virginia had a pretty big year last year, lost a lot. I think they'll kind of be like middle of the conference. And then Wake Forest, a team you'll see tonight against the Clemson Tigers in the 9, Pitt in the 10, Syracuse in the 11. I still don't think they're that great. NC State's not that great. I think Georgia Tech can make some improvements. I still don't think they're going to be that good. Clearly they're number 13 in our Patrick Party ACC projected standings. Duke in the 14, and I don't think Boston College is going to be good at all. So I think they'll be dead last. So I think that's how it'll shape up. I think your ACC championship game in Charlotte, North Carolina this year will be Clemson and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get into just a couple of what I'm going to claim the decent or somewhat interesting teams. We're not going to talk about Boston College. No offense to anybody. So we'll start with the Clemson Tigers. Clemson, coming off that loss in New Orleans, the first loss in a couple of years. They went 15-0, blew out Alabama in San Francisco. Now they're back. I think they could pretty much, it's not going to be as much of a cakewalk this year, but I think they'll still be able to make it to the playoff. I would even say probably undefeated. I don't really think tonight's game is going to be that close. I think Clemson has a really strong squad. They have a lot of returning leadership. I mean, it helps when you have a junior quarterback coming back. He's already taken you to the national championship twice. So, when you think about everybody, you kind of really think about your upperclassmen and your leadership, because it'd be really hard. Your team, I don't know who it could be. I can't think of an example, but if you had a new coach and a whole bunch of really young guys, I just think it'd be really tough to come in and have a wildly successful year without all the practices and everything that's gone with that. So our next team is Notre Dame, and our ACC preview this year, the Fighting Irish are now in the ACC with Ian Book and Brian Kelly. Ian Book they kind of had two quarterbacks when they went to the college football playoff and played Clemson in the Cotton Bowl 2 years ago. So, it was a big year for them. I think they can have a pretty successful year. I don't really see them making the playoffs, but I think we'll get into it later. Our New Year's 6 games, when you're picking those, you only have 3 conferences plus your group of 5 team to pick from, so it's really a lot different. So it's kind of bizarre. Some teams that I wouldn't have initially got put in because, I think if your top team is going in at the 1 spot, your best team in the conference is going into the playoff, then one more team, so for mine, it's the SEC. So the SEC already has the top 2 in the playoff. And then you're going to at least have probably 2 more teams get a New Year's 6 bid. So then you're really looking at maybe your top 4 teams in a conference could all be in the New Year's 6. So it's going to be hard to fill the Birmingham Bowl. So I think it'll be a pretty good year for Notre Dame. I like them in a New Year's 6 game. We'll talk about that in a minute. Then you have your North Carolina Tar Heels with Mac Brown. They have ridden the hype train. People, when they were going to play Auburn, it was going to be the big upset. It would be their big coming out party. They're going to be great this year. They're going to give Clemson a run for the money. They might even dethrone Clemson, blah, 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 blah. So people really like them. I think they're okay. I think they'll have a decent year. I think they have some talent. I think Mac Brown has done a great job. So we'll see what happens. But I don't think they're going to beat Clemson. And that's probably their next step, in my opinion, is not beating Clemson. It's beating, they had some really close games with some pretty crummy teams. I think they had to beat Miami on a last-second play. They just kind of need to be able to really beat the not very good team, which Miami's okay. They really need to beat them, and then they need to probably have a really close game with Notre Dame. So that's interesting. Okay, now we have the Virginia Tech Hokies. They are finally, after what seems like, I think it is 30 years, they have a new defensive coordinator. They probably couldn't have picked a worse offseason to do it, but that's the case. So it's kind of weird. They didn't win the Belk Bowl last year. Kentucky beat them. So they had an okay year. So Justin Fuente, their head coach, he's back. Virginia Tech did not have a good start to last season. They really bounced back. I believe they lost some games. I'm sure they lost some games they weren't supposed to. They had bad record. They came back. They made it to the Belk Bowl. I want to say, they didn't beat Virginia. It was the first time in years they didn't beat Virginia. So kind of a not that great of a year. Kind of a sad year, defense coordinator's gone. So we'll see how it turns out in this kind of new-ish era. It's kind of all Justin Fuente's people now. We'll see how they do. I think they'll be okay, but I don't think they're going to be contending for anything too special. And then you have the Miami Hurricanes. And you know what? We never really know what we're going to get out of them. Rhett Lashley, we've already said, is the new offensive coordinator. I believe they lost to La Tech in a bowl game, in a very meaningless bowl game. I think Miami went 6-6. So we'll see. Miami, it would really do them some good if they could beat Florida State, and that's pretty early in the season. We'll get to that in our ACC games of the year. To kind of help get them kind of on the map, because Florida State's falling and Miami's been falling. That's kind of how Florida's really kind of taken it up, because all their other rivals have kind of gone down. That's kind of helped UCF a little bit. So we'll see how Miami can do, how their offense can do. I think with Derek King, they definitely have a chance to be a better team. You remember, it wasn't that long ago, which this was with Mark Richt, that they did go undefeated through the last week of the season. I think they lost to Pittsburgh or something. Kind of a weird way that went down. And then our Florida State Seminoles, we just mentioned them. That Miami game is coming up. Well, they kind of have a new era. You had Jimbo, and that kind of fell off a cliff. We didn't really know how that ended. It was kind of a weird way how we kind of just like left, and then it was this whole weird thing. And then they hired Willie Taggart, and that was kind of a disaster. Well, it was a disaster. There's no nice way to put that. They stunk, and I mean, we'll just kind of have to see where they go from here with their new head coach. I'm sure he's trying to. They kind of need to really reinstill, and I know this has been one of the things he's talked about, is really trying to focus on being a really well-disciplined team. They weren't for quite a while. They were the most penalized team. They lost to Boise State at home. It was like a shootout, and they were up by like 20, and they somehow lost. So I think it's really just kind of getting back to their culture as a whole that they had in the height of the Jimbo Fisher era. Now we have the Louisville Cardinals. You remember last season they opened up on Monday night against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Nobody thought it'd be close. They actually contended. I mean, they didn't win, but they contended. So we'll see how they do in their second year removed from the Petrino era. I mean, it did produce a Heisman Trophy winner, so, I mean, we can't act like it was the worst thing in the world, but it wasn't that great. So we'll see how Louisville will do. Most people aren't really picking them. They're not really a pick to be that great. I think they're gonna surprise a couple people. Maybe they'll win a game they're not supposed to. I don't know. And then we have the Virginia Cavaliers. They had probably their best season ever. They went to the Orange Bowl last year, lost to Florida. They were no match. They were like 9-3. They made it to the Orange Bowl. They didn't really compete with Clemson, but they did beat Virginia Tech for the first time in a while. Their quarterback is gone. Kind of a whole new team to some extent, a lot younger. I think this could hurt them. We'll see how they do, but I think it might be definitely a coming back to earth, kind of your more classic Virginia football team this year that we were used to for a while. And then our last team in our ACC preview is the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Second year under Jeff Collins, they kind of went from their option. They didn't have any wide receivers, and this guy wants to throw it all around. So we'll kind of see if they can make a step and improve. They've really upped their facilities. They're really trying, not really to compete with Georgia, but, just to kind of get back to being relevant a little bit. I mean, they just had such a terrible year. I think they lost to the Citadel last year. So we'll just see if Georgia Tech can kind of just win some games they're not supposed to, contend for some they're not supposed to, and maybe win a couple ACC games and improve. But with that, we're going to go ahead and get into our ACC Games of the Year. It's conference only, except for these first few non-conference games. None of these non-conference games are really that exciting because with the ACC guidelines, they had to be in your state, or they had to follow all these protocols. It was kind of weird, so a lot of teams are just playing crummy teams in their state. So we'll see. I don't think Clemson's playing anybody good. So I think it's really more just kind of a gimme game. So these are all conference-only games. And with that, we'll start the big kind of rivalry, Miami and Florida State. This is the big one. Both teams everyone needs to win, but they really need this. It could really help if Miami could really beat Florida State. Although Florida State stunk the last couple of years, they've been beating Miami. So that's really kind of hurt them. It would be big for the Canes to get a big win over the Seminoles. These used to be some great games back in the 90s. If you go back and watch it, they're really not now. So we'll kind of see. It's not the same, but it's a pretty big game for both programs, as both coaches kind of really need a big win to kind of help get their seasons going. And then we'll keep it with Florida State, and we'll go to Notre Dame. Notre Dame, they now are going to have to play just about all of the ACC teams. This will be a fun one with Florida State and Notre Dame, two pretty historic programs. I think this is really not going to be too terribly exciting for Notre Dame, but it's kind of a big name thing, and I'm sure ESPN will promote it and put it on ESPN at 6 o'clock on a Saturday. So it's a fun one. And then this is a pretty interesting one. As we said, North Carolina needs to win some of the games that they're supposed to win. I think they lost a couple of games they weren't supposed to. They contended with some teams that weren't very good. I think they almost lost to somebody pretty sorry, like a Coastal, someone pretty terrible. Someone like, Coastal Carolina or something. So they really need to win this Virginia Tech game. They kind of need to win the games they're supposed to. All of the mediocre teams of the conference is what they're going to need to kind of definitely win so they can get ready for their big boy games that they think they're already a part of. And we'll keep it on North Carolina and go to Florida State. Same kind of thing here. This is a fun one. Kind of a little bit later in the season now. We're going in chronological order, by the way, so these aren't like my favorite games, but we have about one per week. I think this is a pretty decent one, but I think when you look at it with North Carolina and Florida State. This would be big for Florida State to get a win over a team that has really big expectations. Everyone's really high on. This could really help get some buy-in for Mike Norvell. Hadn't had a lot of practice, so I don't know how much I'd put into Florida State. And then back to Notre Dame. Notre Dame plays a lot of great games, and if you notice, I think we only have Clemson. We have them 3 times. They're coming up towards the end. Clemson definitely has more of a harder schedule towards the back half, or hard for ACC standards. We'll put it that way. They don't play North Carolina, by the way. That was mentioned in our newsletter. So, Notre Dame plays Louisville. I think it's a good one, but I'm definitely going to will probably favor Notre Dame in this one. It's just kind of a game that they could potentially get tripped up on. And the ACC game of the year, not plural, this is probably the best game, is your Notre Dame-Clemson matchup. This is the one everybody's excited about. This is the one where, Clemson could actually lose. Let's all turn our TVs on. We'll see. This is on NBC. This is in South Bend. There won't be as big of a crowd factor, but this is everyone's. If Clemson's going to lose, it's this week against this team. So I'm excited for this one. It's fun to watch Clemson actually have to play somebody decent. So we'll see. Oh, look at our Patrick Party Cup. I just, I kind of turned it that way at the camera. Anyways, so I really like this matchup. I think it's going to be a lot of fun for sure. And then you have Florida State, Clemson. This is a great matchup for Clemson. Florida State, this was kind of like the big game when you kind of had, you had Florida State just blowing them out. Kind of at the beginning of the Dabo Swinney area. Florida State wins the national championship. Then it starts to get really close. And we had some really, really good games for about 3 seasons. And then it was kind of like Florida State was really good. And then we got to be really good. And then Clemson just took over and blew. Last year I think they beat them 56-9, some huge number. So we'll see if Florida State can just kind of redeem themselves or just look decent in this game. And then we have probably our second biggest game of the ACC this year. We have North Carolina and Notre Dame. This is probably the game for second place in the ACC. I think it'll be a fun one. But I don't know. This is the game. This is probably the one that North Carolina, they don't play Clemson this year. This is their biggest game of the year. We'll see if they can really make a jump here. I think if they could beat Notre Dame, this could really help propel their program. So we've said it. This is kind of the end of our ACC preview. I like Clemson and Notre Dame to meet in Charlotte for that ACC championship, I believe on December 19th. That's kind of when all the championship games got moved to. So I'm still going with the Clemson Tigers. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get into our college football playoff predictions. First show of the year, we're about to kind of get into some of our big prediction side of the things. Got our college football playoff predictions, our New Year's Six predictions, and then we'll have Pat's picks, or Patrick's picks, whatever you want to call it, coming up in just a couple minutes as we round out our show. But for the college football playoff, it's kind of weird. A lot of people are saying, I think your 3 conference champions, they're not automatic buys, that's not how this works, but they're making it, pretty much, unless there's some huge upset. You're going to have your 3 conference champions, and then there's that 4th seed. And every year it's like, who's going to get the 4th seed? Well, this year, it's not going to be a conference champion, most likely. I am not in the boat that thinks that a group of 5, whoever wins the American Athletic Conference, will get the 4th seed. I don't think that's how it's going to work. I think Desmond Howard said he thinks Cincinnati's going to get the 4th seed. I'm sure it'll be something ESPN's going to want to talk about if there is an undefeated. I think if they're not undefeated, there's not even a chance at that. But we're going to go ahead and reveal. Dun dun dun. It's not that exciting. Our playoff predictions. So we have 2 teams from the SEC. So let's go ahead and get into it. So on this side, you have your 1-4 game. Clemson's the 1. I think they're undefeated. They're 1 right now. I think they'll stay 1 unless there's something surprising. I think they cakewalk it. Well, not cakewalk. They have to play Notre Dame, but they make it pretty easily to I think with 2 big wins over Notre Dame. I think they're undefeated. I like Clemson as the overall number 1. Everyone thinks highly of them, and they should. They've earned it. So I like Clemson. And then on the other side, I think Oklahoma's the 2. I don't really think they have much of a tough time getting through that Big 12. I think they're undefeated. We'll see. Every year it seems like they lose a game they're not supposed to. can they win the games they're supposed to? Can they not lose to a Kansas State or an Iowa State or anyone of that kind of side of the world? We will see. And then I like the Auburn Tigers, your SEC champions, and the 3 spot. But I don't think anyone makes it out of the SEC alive. And what I mean by that is undefeated. I don't think there's an undefeated squad. I think when you play 10 SEC games within just a couple of weeks, I don't think there's going to be an undefeated SEC champion. And then Alabama, everybody loves them. We can't go a year without them being in the playoffs. ESPN would just have a heart attack. I like Alabama in the 4th spot. I think Mac Jones is better than people are giving him credit for. I mean, he had some ridiculous numbers against Auburn and Michigan. He just didn't beat Auburn because I guess Alabama doesn't know how to count. But I really think it's going to be a good playoff. I like Auburn and Clemson and that title game in Miami this year where the Super Bowl was last year. We'll see how it all turns out. It seems like the dates for the actual games, you'll have your Rose Bowl and you'll have your Sugar Bowl, or our 2 playoff semifinal games. They're still going to be on January 1st. Rose Bowl will be at 5 o'clock like always, and then the Sugar Bowl after that. And then the National Championship will be about a week later in Miami. And now we'll get into our other New Year's 6 games. I guess those are 2 of them. That's one thing I've always thought was a little weird. We'll get into our New Year's 6 games, and our first one is the Capital One Orange Bowl. And I know what you're thinking, North Carolina in a New Year's 6 game. What? Well, as we kind of said earlier, when I was filling this out, it kind of opened my eyes to, wow, a lot of teams can make the New Year's 6. They would have never, ever gotten close if we had all 5 conferences. But when you don't have all 5 conferences, if you already have your top 3 teams in the playoff, SEC having 2, then you're going to most likely have to have at least 2 more from each conference. Your top 3 teams from each conference will most likely make the New Year's 6. So I think North Carolina, now technically the ACC's representation slot is in this game. And that's where I don't really know the rules on. I have Notre Dame in one of these games too, but I just kind of thought geography-wise and what I thought made sense matchup-wise and kind of what I personally wanted to see, I put North Carolina in the ACC slot against Florida. Florida's going back. I think Florida's going to have a big year. Some people want to put them in the playoff. I don't know about that. But I also don't know if they would put Florida in the same bowl game they just went to, but who knows. So that is our little thing about the ACC. We'll go ahead and just go to our other one with Notre Dame. So I have Notre Dame, Texas in the Cotton Bowl. And you're thinking, Texas? Nobody's picking Texas for this. Well, here's the thing. When you look at it, you have to think about the top 3 teams in every conference. We've said it a couple times. I think Texas finishes in the top 3. I think Texas and Oklahoma State. So I like Texas, Notre Dame, and the Cotton Bowl. It's kind of a classic matchup. I think people would really like to watch it. Everybody loves Sam Ehlinger, so I think this is a good one. And then in the Peach Bowl, you have your Group of 5 representative. It's their turn. It's been 3 years since UCF went to the Peach Bowl. I like Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati's going to come out of the American. I think they've got a good team this year. It could be Memphis. It could be UCF. I'm just picking Cincinnati. And then I have the Georgia Bulldogs also going to the Peach Bowl. They're the 4th best team, in my opinion, in the SEC. And I think since the SEC got 2 in the playoff, they'll get 2 more in the New Year's 6. 3 more. I think I actually put 3. Yeah, in our next game. So I like the Georgia Bulldogs playing in the Peach Bowl at home, kind of right in their backyard. Maybe by then they'll have some fans to fill Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And then, in our last one, LSU, UCF. Now, LSU, I don't think they're going to have that great of a year. I don't. But when you look at it, if you're thinking about SEC teams here, I wouldn't probably put the 4th best team in the Big 12 in there. I wouldn't put the 4th best team in the ACC there. I don't really think I would really want, maybe another American Athletic Conference team could get in there. But if you think about the SEC, I think it's Auburn, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, and I'm not that high on Texas A&M. We'll see. I feel like Texas A&M is always this is their year, this is their time. How many times is Kelly Mond going to have a breakout year? And then they go and proceed to lose like 5 games. So we'll see what happens with Texas A&M. But as of right now, unlike LSU, Oklahoma State, I think they're a pretty good team. Of course, all the Big 12 teams have a great offense. But we'll see. I definitely think Mike Gundy has a great squad down there. So we're going to talk about the Patrick Party for just 1 second before we get into our picks today as we go ahead and wrap it up. We got about 12 minutes-ish to go. So we're going to have our Patrick Party, our regular posted show, coming up later today around noon. Tomorrow, the NFL kicks off. We are going to send out an NFL-specific newsletter tomorrow morning. We'll also have Prime Time with Patrick, kind of our NFL Pick'em show. We're going to have our Patrick Party polls, so you can vote on Instagram and Facebook who you think you're going to vote for. Follow us on Twitter, but definitely subscribe to our newsletter. It's kind of a more in-depth look at a lot of these games. You'll definitely want to read it. We post one every single week of the college and really NFL season. We kind of go all the way through the Super Bowl, and then we get into college basketball and that kind of thing. So we're back. We had a break in the summer because there was really no sports for quite a while. So it should be a good one. Yes, and everything you'll want to see, any YouTube video, anything is on patrickparty.com. So we encourage you to go look there. But it's now time for our last little segment, Pat's Picks. So we're going to start with Iowa State, Louisiana Lafayette. Iowa State isn't going to have any fans there. This is the game that will precede College Game Day on ESPN. I don't think it's going to be that close of a game. It's not that great of a game. I kind of wish they had put North Carolina Syracuse, because I think that's a pretty good matchup on ESPN. But they put it on the ACC network, so nothing we can do about that. I like Iowa State, though. This one won't be very close. Then our next game to pick. Remember, we had some other games that got canceled because of COVID, or postponed. I don't think they were canceled. So now we have Notre Dame Duke at 1 o'clock on NBC, Notre Dame Stadium. Notre Dame definitely a pick to win this year, but I'm going to have to go with, I don't think the Blue Devils are that good. I'm going to have to go with the Fighting Irish. Then we have Kansas State, Arkansas State. I think it's going to be a fun one on Fox Sports 1, our second time slot in Bill Snyder Stadium. I think Kansas State, the Wildcats, will run away with this one. Arkansas State's okay. I think they played earlier this last weekend, but I like Kansas State. Not that close. Oklahoma, Missouri State. Let's just go ahead and get this one over with. Oklahoma. It's on pay-per-view. Nobody's watching it. It won't be close. Missouri State stinks. Then we have Tulane, South Alabama. South Alabama got that big win over Southern Mississippi. Southern Mississippi fired their coach. Kind of a whole weird thing how that went down. I think Tulane's pretty good. I'm going to have to go with Tulane, though. South Alabama isn't going undefeated this year. Anybody? Then we have Texas, UTEP. This one's also kind of a crummy game. There's only a couple of decent games, and I put those towards the end. Texas, UTEP, I don't think it's going to be very close again. I like the Longhorns. UTEP is probably one of the worst teams in FBS. Then our late night game, we have Kansas, Coastal Carolina. I think Les Miles is going to start this year off with the win. I don't really know how they're going to do this year. Maybe they can make a bowl game. I don't really know. I think there's going to be less bowl games. There'd have to be, because even if every single team playing went to a bowl game, I don't think you could fit it. So I'm going to go with Kansas and that one. And then we have North Carolina, Syracuse, one of our few good games in the ACC today. I think it's going to be a good one. Syracuse, they're not as good as people have really thought. I really kind of like North Carolina in this one. I think they're going to have a pretty big year under Sam Howell in the second year of the Mac Brown era. And then we have Florida State, Georgia Tech. This is going to be a big one for Georgia Tech. If Georgia Tech could somehow find a way to win this one, it would really hurt Florida State. Florida State, they didn't have a lot of time to implement their whole new plan with Mike Norvell. I think it's going to hurt them. I do think they'll probably get the win over Georgia Tech, though, today at home. There will be a couple fans in the stadium at Doak Campbell. And then on ESPN primetime tonight, College Game Day's there. This is probably the game of the day. Clemson, Wake Forest. Clemson, your number one team in the AP preseason poll. Wake Forest, not that great. Just kind of casual Wake Forest. We'll see how they do. This might be a good game for quarter. If we get lucky, it might be a good game at halftime. But I like Clemson. I don't think it's very close. But we'll see how it all turns out in the end. So that is going to conclude it here for us. Our first Patrick Party pregame show. We'll be back as of right now, unless things change and we're able to go to football games. We'll probably be back next week. So you can watch our Instagram and Facebook and Twitter feeds all at the Patrick Party for all of your information on that. So that is going to conclude it For us here on the Patrick Party pregame show, have a great college football Saturday. It's back. And then tomorrow we have the NFL. So enjoy your football-filled weekend. Until next time, I'm Patrick Bingham. So long, everybody.
Yay, Patrick.
Ugh.
Yay.